Okay, so we're now ready to go ahead and start fitting our lower frames onto our upper frames here. This is a very simple process. All we're going to do is come along to our 4 bolts here with the plastic surrounding them, and we'll just remove these from the frames. And what you'll find is behind each of these bolts is a nylon nut that's held in the plastic on the inside of the frames there. What that means is we don't need to use thread lock or anything when we do this. We can just go ahead and put our frames on and just tighten our bolts straight up into those nuts that are already in position for us at the back there. So I'll just go ahead, remove my bolts, show you how one of these frames goes on. Just like that, just position it there, get those locations right like that. I'll just go ahead, put my bolts back in, and that'll be my lower frame fitted. So I'll go ahead and do that, and we'll come back when both of these frames are on. Okay, so there we have our lower frames fitted on there. We can now move on, think about looking at our undercarriage assembly. So the first thing I like to do, you can probably see there's 4 small grub screws there. What I'm going to do is just come to my undercarriage legs, and you see these holes here, the undercarriage leg there. I'm just going to put these grub screws one at a time into these holes. I'm just going to screw them in a small amount, enough to hold them in, but the important thing is don't screw them in far enough to restrict your skids going in later on. And the reason I like to do this is purely so they're in position for later on when I come to tighten them up, and it means I'm not going to lose them or anything while I'm in the process of putting the rest of this undercarriage together. So I'll go ahead and do that now for each one. Okay, so that's all my grub screws in there. So what I'm going to do now is come to my canopy mounting bracket here. This just goes at the bottom on the undercarriage, and you can see the canopy will just slot into that groove there. As you can see, we have our 2 nylon nuts here. So what I'll do is just go ahead and remove the bolts that are already in this. Now we can go ahead and just pick either one of these. They're both the same, so it doesn't matter which one you choose. Just find this recess here at the front. What we're going to do is just locate our canopy mounting bracket here into that recess with the Align logo facing upwards on the top here, like that. So what I'm going to do is turn it over, put my bolts in, and just tighten those up. Okay, so that's our canopy bracket mounted on there. So what I'm going to look at next are these smaller brackets here. As you can see, there's a larger bolt there with a nylon nut at the back, and also these 2 smaller bolts here, and we also have 2 nuts in there as well. What we're going to do is just remove these bolts there. We're going to mount each one of these onto our skids in this orientation. So you want the bolt here on the outside, and you want your nylon nut there on the inside of the skids. So just like that. So I'm going to go ahead and put these bolts in and mount this on here. I'm just going to do these up relatively loosely for now. I won't tighten them up fully yet. So I'll just go around and do that on each of my skids for these brackets. Okay, so that's the last of my brackets attached. As you can see, I've just left them a bit loose there, just so we can get them nicely into the frames when we come to fit them. Now the first thing we want to do here is decide which one of these undercarriage legs is going to go at the front. And as you can see, we've already fitted our canopy mounted bracket here. So this is going to be the one we want at the front, with the canopy bracket here facing that way towards the front, and also our undercarriage legs sloping towards the front as well. Okay, so now we've decided that. The next thing I'm going to do is just remove our 2 bolts here. Just quickly take those out and set them to one side. And then when we've done that, we'll be ready to fit this front undercarriage into our frames. So before we go any further, probably the best thing to advise is, you've still got your main shaft in here, it's probably best to just take that out now, because it's still loose in there. And chances are when we come to fit our undercarriage, we're going to have to turn the model over on its back and get access to all different angles of it. So just go ahead and do that, and it will prevent it getting in the way or falling out or anything. Okay, so I'm now going to take my front undercarriage, just get that. We want our frames to be on the outside of these brackets. So the brackets are going to go on the inside and the frame's going to be on the outside. So I'll just go ahead and slot that in there, like that. And just line my hole up there, like that. And then in theory, just don't tighten it up fully, just loosely now. There we go, that's that one in. What I can do now I've removed my main shaft, is actually flip this on its back here, just like that. That's going to give me access to this bolt from this side. I'll just go ahead and line that up, like that, and just tighten that up. Not fully again, just fit that loosely for now. And that's our front undercarriage for now in position. So what I can do is go ahead and repeat exactly the same process on this rear undercarriage skid. Okay, so that's undercarriage legs on there. What I did was just flip the model back over so I can get access to this bolt easily. So now I've done that, we can go ahead and think about tightening everything up and fitting our skids. The first thing I'm going to do is flip the model back over again and come to these bolts here. Now you may remember when we fitted these, we put them in but we didn't tighten them up, so our legs are flopping around there like that. What I want to do is just come and tighten these up now. The reason for that is, what I found is, if you go to put your skids through your holes here, and these legs are flopping around too much, I find it jams up the skids and you can't get them in very easily. So what I'm going to do is just tighten these bolts up first of all, and then we'll be able to get our skids in nice and easily. Okay, those bolts are tight now, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and fit my skids. Just double check, got the Align logo on the outside there, and they'll just look nicer that way. Just go and head and slide those in there, like that. Should go in relatively easily now. There we go. That's one in. Let's get the other one in here. And the nice thing about these is they come with the end lugs here pre-installed, so you don't have to fit those yourself anymore. I'll just get that one in like that. There we go. That's in there, roughly positioned. I'll just turn it back over. I can go ahead and think about tightening everything up there. Okay, so that's all my undercarriage together now. We can go ahead and tighten everything up. If you haven't already, make sure you tighten your 4 upper bolts here on your lower frames. These ones here, just check they're tight. Flip it over, just double check they're tight all under there. And finally, just tighten your grub screws up there once your skids are finally positioned. Just get them tight like that, so these can't turn or come out. And finally, the last thing you can do if you want is take your skid rubbers here, and they just push over the skids like that. All they're for is to stop it sliding around on smooth surfaces, or if you happen to fly off concrete, it stops it spinning around on you when it takes off. So there we go, that's our undercarriage fitted, and we're ready to move on to the next stage of the assembly. So what we can do next is look at fitting our motor into our frames there. The first thing to consider is, first and foremost, which way round do I want my motor to go in? And for me, I want my wires to come out the front, there like that, purely because I'm going to be mounting my speed controller at the front here. So I've got my wires to come out in the same direction. So that's where I want to go in from there. So I come to my mounting plate, and this goes in this way round with the grills at the back. So I know the grills are going to be at the back, and I know I want my motor wires at the front. So that means I'm going to want my plate to go on this way, like that. Then which way round, you have your countersunk holes at the top here on one side, on the other side it's just flat. I want the flat side to go down onto our motor. So we're going to go with our plate onto our motor that way. So you can go ahead and mount that now. Just take your motor mounting bolts out your motor, like that. Get your plate in the right position and just double check that's correct, like that. Grab some your blue thread lock. We'll put some on these just to be safe. Make sure your motor doesn't come loose on its mounting there. Put a bit on there like that. And just go in with your bolts. Just again loosely to begin with. I'll just do one more. Bit of thread lock on there like that. And then just come in the opposite hole there. Just loosely. There we go. So I'll go around the rest of my bolts doing that. I'll go around and tighten them all up and I'll be ready for the next stage. Okay, so that's our motor mounting bracket secured onto our motor there. So what we can look at doing now is fitting our drive up pulley onto our motor shaft. Now I actually have the 23 tooth pulley here. In the standard kit you actually get a 23 and 24 tooth. So I have the option of both in my case, but I'm going to go with this one to begin with. The 24 tooth would have given me a slightly higher head speed, but I think just for the first few flights I'm going to start with this one and then change to the 24 if I find the need. So the principle for this, when we come to fit our pulley, is you'll see on the motor shaft there is a darker area here, and above that there's a groove in the shaft. What we're going to do is put a pulley on like this. We're going to line that groove at the top there with the top of our pulley, like that. What this means is these grub screws here that you can see in the pulley, that's going to position them directly over this darker area on the shaft here and allow us to tighten them up and grip the shaft well. Right, so that's the principle that we're going to follow. So the next thing we need to do is come over to our green R48 here. Now I believe the technical term for this is anaerobic retainer, but it's otherwise known as the green stuff. What we're going to do is, I'm going to take one of my drivers here. I'm just going to get some of this green R48 onto the end there, like that. And what this is going to allow me to do is just feed it down onto the inside of the pulley, just like that. I want to get some inside, just coat the inside of the pulley with this green R48. And then what we're going to do is come to our motor shaft and also get some of our green R48 onto this as well. Now you don't want too much on here, you want just the right amount, not too much and not too little either. I'm just going to get some on the shaft there. Just coat the shaft in it like that. What I'm going to do is, as we discussed before, just slide my pulley down onto that. Just turn it a bit like that as it goes down. Line it up with that groove at the top. There we go. And then what I can do is come in, tighten one of my grub screws like that, just to hold it in position. Then what I can do is come to the other grub screw, just take that out, give my driver a wipe down, get some of our T43 onto our grub screw here. Get that back in the hole in our pulley there. Go ahead and tighten this up really firmly. Yeah, make sure that's really locked up well there. Because what we don't want is this pulley coming loose on us. So I'll go ahead now and do my other grub screw. Bit of my blue thread lock. Get that in there. There we go. Just give that a wipe down. Check everything's tight. Our grub screws there. There we go. That should be then our motor prepared and ready to go in our frames. Okay, so that's our motor prepared and ready to go in. So what we can do now is think about mounting a motor here into the frames. So as you can see, I've gone ahead and already removed the bolts from our motor mounting bracket here. So what we can do is go ahead and fit this into the frames. Again, make sure we're the right way around with our grills at the back, wires at the front. What I'm going to do is run these wires under the radio tray here, just like that, and then slot it in between the frames. What you'll find is, although the frames are tight, you can actually still get it in. You might find it easier if it's a bit stiff. Just loosen those two bolts in your radio tray there, and that'll help you move it around a bit easier. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just line up the two front holes of my bracket with the slotted holes at the top of the frames up here. Just try and get my bolts in loosely. Get one in there at the front and come around to this one here like this. Just get my other front bracket hole lined up, get my bolt in like that. I can just do them by hand for now, because what we want to do is allow us to rotate our motor up and down like this. So like a hinge pivot there we've got. So what we're going to do is have a motor about like that. Now, this might be hard for you to see on the camera, but what I'm going to do is get my main drive belt onto this large pulley on the right side here. I'm going to get it on there. I'm going to push it up so it's trying to go onto the drive pulley on the motor there. Then when I've got that, I'm going to kind of hold it there on the pulley on the motor. I'm just going to rotate the motor down like this. And as I do, just feed that belt onto the motor pinion pulley there. So there we go. I've done that. My belt is on both pulleys. My motor is now down in position. And it's as simple as that. So what we can do now is line up our other two holes and loosely fit our bolts into there. So I'll go ahead and do that now. So that one. And to that one there. Okay, now all our 4 bolts there are loosely fitted. So the final thing we're going to do is set our belt tension. So just make sure your main drive belt's positioned correctly on both pulleys again there. Then all you've got to do is pull your motor back really firmly, get a really nice tension on that drive belt there, and just come in and tighten up your bolts, whilst keeping a good firm tension on that belt. So I'll tighten those two, which should then allow me to come round and tighten these. There we go. I'll just tighten the last one there. That should be fine. Then just check your belt tension, and you want a firm feel to the belt there. So you don't want it coming loose or loosening the tension there, so it slips on the pulley. So just make sure that's firm when you press it. Press the middle of the belt, make sure you've got a firm feel there. And that's it, that's ready to move on. One thing I would say is, if you want to go ahead and Loctite these bolts, you can follow the same process as we have before. Just remove one at a time, go ahead and put your blue thread lock on, and just put them back in and tighten them up. And that way you won't lose the position of your motor. Okay, so with that, we're ready to move on to the next part of the assembly. Okay, so that's our motor in position. So what we can do now is look at fitting our boom. So the first thing I'm going to do is come to this boom clamp here. As you can see, we have our 2 bolts and a bolt here for clamping. And what we're going to do is come to these 2 bolts and just check that they're screwed out enough to ensure that there's none of the shaft protruding on this side here, like that. And the reason for this is, if you remember, we saw these 2 metal blocks inside the frame earlier on. That's what these bolts are going to press up against. So by ensuring our bolts as far as possible, it means our clamp is going to go in as far forward as possible. All that means is our boom's going to be in a nice forward position, and it's going to allow us to get our belt on easier when we come to do that later on. So I'll go ahead and do that now. As you can see, I've already removed these bolts here that we're going to use to mount it in the frames. And before we do that, just remember, as we did with the last one at the back here, just thread your tail belt through there, like that. Just get that in position. And for the orientation, you can see the Align logos at the top there. And I've got the clamping bolt there on the left side. So I'm just going to go ahead and mount that into those slotted holes at the back there. I'll just loosely fit it for now. We don't want to tighten it up. That way we'll be ready to come along and fit our boom in. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is just put our tail boom there. What we're going to do is get our tail belt, bring it round to the entrance of our boom there. What I'm going to do now is get our tail belt through our tail boom there. Now the best way I find of doing this is just taking a piece of wire or anything thin enough to get through the boom with a hook on the end, like that. That's just going to allow us to pull the belt through the boom, like that. So I'll go ahead and put my wire through the boom there, like that. You can see it come through the other end. I'll just come on here, hook on my tail belt, get it started down there. And I'll just pull the belt through the boom like that. And just be aware that when you do this, you need to get the tail boom in these clamps here before the belt will come through the end. So just carefully do that there. So my belt's come through the end now, like that. So I'm ready to go ahead and just push the boom into there. Again, being sure that I get it in the right position with that cut out on the left side. So what I'm going to do is push that, it will locate into that tab there, and you should hear a nice clicking sound like that, and my boom is firmly in position. Okay, so that's our boom fitted in and our tail belt pulled through the end there, as you can see. So what we can do now is just focus on working on the tail end of this. What that means is we can come to our tail gearbox over here, and this does come pre-assembled, but you'll find that everything is still loose, everything around here. So what I want to do is just go around all our bolts, retighten everything, put a thread lock on where we need to, and then we'll be safe to go flying with it. So the first thing I'll do is actually come to these bolts here, and these two on this link here. If we turn it over, you can see we've got the same 3 bolts there. We've also got this link here for our rotor servo linkage there. Now, when you're dealing with this arm, we can just follow exactly the same procedure as we did with our servos beforehand. So just take your ball out, put some thread lock on, put it back in there, tighten it up. Now you'll see it's actually on the outer hole there. There's an inner and an outer hole. I'm going to go ahead and leave it in the outer hole there. The manual shows it on the outer hole, so it should be fine there. So I'll just go ahead and tighten it up there. Come around to these bolts here, and what you want to do on these is just take them out, put some thread lock on them, and then retighten them. And I can just show you one here. But we need to be a bit careful when we're doing this. So as you can see, we're dealing with smaller bolts now than what we used to or have been before. So when we do come to put a thread lock on, just make sure you don't put too much on. You just want a small bit on the end again, like that. When you come to put it in, just be careful you don't get any thread lock on the bearings there. Okay, and just tighten it up like that. The reason for that is, we need to be careful, is as we're tightening them up, we want to keep checking our tail mechanism here and keep checking that it's moving freely. Because as you tighten these bolts up, what you'll find is, that it gets stiffer as you tighten them up. But you don't want it to get too stiff. You don't want to reach a point where you're having to sort of force the mechanism around. Because as you can imagine, your gyro is going to be working hard to keep your tail straight when you're flying. So the freer we can keep this mechanism, the better it's going to be for our tail performance. So just go around, as you tighten those up, just keep checking that it's not getting unduly stiff. And next point is, when you come to these two here, again the same principle applies. They're even smaller than these, so just be extra careful. And in particular when you come to this brass, the Phillips headed screw here, because it's clamping down onto a plastic link here, that's probably going to be the most likely point where you're going to introduce some friction into your mechanism there. So just keep an eye on that. You want to make sure that that screw's firmly down. You still want to be tight in there, but not so tight that you jam up your tail mechanism. So just keep an eye on that. The next thing is your tail blade grip bolts here. We're going to leave those loose, just because I'm going to be wanting to remove my tail blade grips here for the next stage. And finally, what I'll show you is this grub screw here. Now I'm going to go ahead and tighten this at this point. But what you want to do is just remove the grub screw and just check that in there you can see a dark area of metal in there. You don't want to be seeing the shiny surface of the shaft. And that's because that dark area is the flat that this grub screw is going to screw down onto. And you want to make sure that's correct, otherwise your hub could spin on your shaft and that wouldn't be a good situation. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is just the same principle we used before on our motor drive pulley when we did the grub screws in that. Let's put some thread lock on this. Check that the flat's lined up there. And just screw that in. Make sure it's really nice and tight on there, like that. There we go. That's a hub fixed on with a grub screw, so that's not going to rotate on us anytime soon. So what I'll do now is just go around the rest of these bolts here, just doing everything I described. We'll come back and pick it up for the next stage. Okay, that's the last of my bolts there that I was telling you about tightened. And as you can see, I've got a nice action there on my tail mechanism. It's obviously a little bit stiffer than when everything was loose, but There's still no undue restriction there, so I'm happy with that. So what we can do now is move on, look at coming to our tail hub shaft in here that goes through our blade grips. Now again, this all comes pre-assembled. What you'll find is at least one of the shaft bolts in there is loose. So what I want to do is take them out and make sure they've got plenty of thread lock on and they're tight when I go to put them back in. And while we do that, we can take the opportunity to take all the bearings and everything, washers off the shaft there, check everything's in the right order, put some grease on, and then put everything back on. So the first thing you want to do is just go ahead and remove your tail blade bolts here. Just put them to one side. Just put the nut on there so you don't lose it, like that. And this means we can get access to our feathering spindle bolts in there, like that. Then we can go ahead and remove this bolt here that's attaching our tail blade grip to this link. If you remember, we left that loose, so we can now come in and just take that out. And just be careful with these because there's a brass insert in the link there, and it can be easy to lose that if it falls out. So I'll just go ahead and remove these. And finally, you can go ahead and remove your feathering shaft bolts that are in there. And as I said before, you may find one of those is just loose and it will just come out on its own. But the technique for this is going to be the same when we come to tighten it up. Is just take two drivers of the same size. If you find both are stiff or they're both turning when you come to loosen them, and just put them there like that. Hold both the bolts and you can just go ahead and loosen them, and you'll find one of them is going to come out for you. Okay, so probably the best thing for me to do now is go ahead, carry on disassembling this, then I can lay out all the parts, come back and show you how everything goes together. Okay, so as you can see, I've gone ahead and disassembled all my parts here and laid them out in the order I want to put them back in. Probably the first thing I'd mention is when you came to disassemble this, if you found that one of your bolts in your feathering spindle there was stuck in and it was too tight to get out without the shaft turning, what you want to do, just find a way of clamping your shaft on a softer material than this steel. So for example, if I were just to get some grips here and just put them on there, I wouldn't want to do that because if I went to try and loosen my bolt there, chances are that would turn in the grips and you just end up with scratches all over your shaft there. So I was actually lucky enough to have a vise with aluminium grips in, which I just used to hold it while I loosened my bolt there. But if you don't have that, you can use some grips with some softer padding under there just to do that. But the key is you want to be using a softer material than this, otherwise you could end up with scratches all over your shaft, which you definitely don't want. Okay, so that's just a quick tip when you come to do that. And secondly, what I'll show you here is those of you that are familiar with the older design tail hub, probably remember they used to be solid and two spigot shafts sticking up there, and just a solid design. Now we have a design that's much more like a main rotor. I'll be seeing that later on, where you have a hollow there all the way through, a hole, and two damper rubbers there in your hub there, just like that. So that's a nice new feature for the TB70 there. Okay, so probably the best thing to do now is what I'll do is go ahead and reassemble all this and show you. What I'll do is just, I'll do one side myself and come back and show you how I do the other side and how everything goes on and in what order, because both sides are the same, so it's probably the best way to do it. Okay, so as you can see, I've already gone ahead and assembled one side of my tail hub shaft there. So what I can do now is come and do the other side. I can show you exactly how each of these pieces fits on. So the first thing I want to do is actually just grab some kitchen towel or anything that you can roll up into a narrow strip like that. What I want to do is just push that down the end of our shaft there, like that. Just clean the inside of our shaft and the threads in there. Get rid of any excess oil or anything that might be in there. And that's so when we come to put our thread lock on, the oil doesn't interfere with the adhesion of the thread lock in there. So there we go, done that. So now I've done that, we're ready to come and look at fitting our parts onto our shaft. So the first thing we're going to do is look at this washer here. Now if you look really closely, you can see that one side, the edges of the washer look smoother. Now if we turn it over, the other side, you'll see the edges actually look sharper. What we want to do with this is make sure that we get the side with the smooth edges on the inside here, up against our damper. So go ahead and put your washer on the shaft with the smooth edges on the inside, like that. And what you can do is go ahead and fit your blade grip. That just has 2 bearings in there. It should just push on the shaft, like that. And then you can see we have our thrust bearing coming next. That's in 3 parts, as you can see. But the important thing to note here is it does matter the order at which these parts go onto your shaft. So if we come into this first one here, just take a look. You can see there's a groove on one side. On the other side it's smooth. It also has engraved in very small lettering, in. Now in is the one we want to put on first. I want to put it with the groove on the outside and the flat bit on the inside. So that's going to go in like that. And next we have this ball race here, and you'll see on one side it's more of a hollow, where you can see the balls in there. On the other side it's more flat. And the side point on the inside is going to be this hollow side here. So that's going to go on like that. And finally we have a piece very similar to the one we saw first. The groove in on one side, flat on the other side. And if you look in small letters, it says out. That's going to go in the opposite way to the in, like that, with a groove on the inside. So effectively we're going to sandwich this ball race here between those 2 pieces. So what I'm going to do is just come over my 3 parts of my thrust bearing here. Just take some grease, and I'll say they've actually put a bit of grease on there for you in the factory already. But I'm going to go ahead and just add some extra grease just into this hollow here where the balls are there, and also around the grooves of these 2 parts here. So I'll go ahead and do that now, and then we'll come back. I can show you how these parts go in. Okay, so I've put my grease onto my thrust bearing pieces there. And when you do come to do this, don't put too much grease on, just lightly coat the surfaces of each one, purely because we don't want to get grease into the threads of our shaft in there that we've just cleaned out. Okay, so what we can do now is look at fitting these pieces onto our shaft in here. There we go, let's put that there. And what I like to do for this, just double check you're getting the right one each time. So that is my inner one there. I'll just put it onto my driver here. And the inner one's going to go with the groove facing outwards towards me. And this is just going to let me guide it down in the blade grip there and onto the shaft. Just like that, it just drops down nice and easily. I'll go ahead and fit my ball bearings here. We want the hollowed out section on the inside, the flat face facing outwards towards me, and just put it on there. Guide it down in there, it just drops over the shaft. Then final piece, just double check that's an outer one, which it is. Want the groove of that to go on the inside, the flat face to face me. I'll just drop that down in there like that and onto the shaft there. Okay, so that's my thrust bearing into position. Go ahead now and take my bolt and washer, and just fit that loosely into there now, like that. Okay, we screw that in loosely. And now we're ready to think about thread locking both of these bolts here. So for this, what we're going to do is take our 2 drivers and we'll be tightening it up like that. But first we want to get our thread lock on onto each individual bolt. So we can go ahead and take one out. And because they're both loose, one of them should just come out easily there. And just line the washer up there with the shaft again. That comes out. Let's get some of your blue thread lock on here. Let's put some on the end there. Again, not too much because you don't want to get any in the bearings or anything, but at the same time you want to make sure you get enough on there to have some effect and hold these bolts in. Like that. Just go ahead, fit this loosely into one side there. Just like that, don't tighten it up yet. Then we'll come around to our other bolt. Just remove that. You can leave the washer on there if it stays on there like that. Just get a bit of thread lock onto the end. There we go. Get that in there. Screw that up. Then we can come in with a rubber driver like this. Just get one on one bolt, one on the other bolt. Just go ahead and tighten that up simultaneously like that. Nice and tight. There we go, because we don't want those coming out on us. And there we go. That's those bolts tight in there. And just be aware, your orientation of your blade grips, you want your Align and logo on the outside there, like that. When you've made sure that's correct, what you can do is go ahead and refit your blade grip link bolts here. Just go ahead and refit those, put some Loctite bit on the end there. Let's put those back in like that, tighten them up, and they'll be ready to go ahead and fit our tail gearbox onto our boom. Okay, so that's our tail gearbox prepared, virtually ready to go onto the boom now. There's just a few things to consider before we do that. The first is just double check your tail mechanism now, after you've tightened up your tail blade grip link bolts there. You might have introduced a bit of stiffness again, so it's always good to double check that that's still moving freely before we put it on there. And mine is, so I'm happy to carry on. Secondly, you want to look at these plastic tabs here. Now you want to take these off before we come to mount the boom, because they belong on the outside. If you try to mount your boom while they're still on there, they'll just jam up and won't go on. So I'm going to take those off. And thirdly, you want to remove the gearbox side plate here on this side of the gearbox. Just take out those 3 bolts and remove that. So I'll go ahead and do that now and just remove those parts. Okay, so as you can see, I've gone ahead and removed the plastic plates from here and also the side plating in my gearbox there. What it's going to do is allow us to get our belt now over our pulley when we come to put it on the boom. But also it's going to give us access to this bolt in here. Hopefully you can see that. It's actually a bolt, goes through this side plating here. And all that does is it's attaching this bracket on the other side that's holding our tail mechanism in position. So what I want to do is just go ahead and double check that's tight. It's actually been tightened at the factory. So I can feel that's really nice and firm and tight there. So I'm happy to carry on. So what we can do now is think about fitting the gearbox onto the boom. Before we do that, the key point to note here is we need to come and check our belt. So the first thing we want to do with the belt is just go to the front, check that your belt's over your drive pulley there. Then when you've got that right, just come, you want to look down the boom from the back, just check that there's no twists or kinks in the belt. You should just be able to see one nice continuous loop all the way from your front drive pulley there to the back. So when you've made sure there's no twists or kinks there, what we're going to do is take our belt. We're going to be looking from the back here towards the front, and we're going to turn our belt clockwise 90 degrees like that, so it's now vertical. So the key point there is to make sure you're looking the right way from the back to the front, and we're turning 90 degrees clockwise. There we go. You need to make sure that's right, because if you get it run the wrong way, you'll find your tail is not going in the right direction. Okay, so that's our belt in the right position. So now what we can do is go ahead and mount our tail gearbox onto our boom. So I'll just thread the belt through there like that. Just slot that in there. Get our driver there just to pull it through. Then what you can do now is just get your belt onto your rear pulley here. Just carefully get it on. Now if you remember, we set our front mounting there to the forwardmost position. You want to make sure everything is as far forward as possible to do this, otherwise you're going to find it really difficult to get it on. Just check everything's as far forward there as it can be. This is all the way in the boom. Your boom at the clamp end there is all the way forward. And just get your belt on the pulley there. And just twist it a bit, might make it a bit easier. There we go, and that's our belt over our pulley there at the back. Okay, so as you can see, that's our tail belt fitted over our pulley there. So what we can do now is look at reattaching these parts that we removed earlier back on to our tail gearbox. So I'll go ahead and do that now. Just reattach your gearbox side plate there, like that. Just locate it into the lugs there. There we go. Then what you can do is go around with your 3 bolts. Just put a bit of thread lock on those and tighten them up. And then also don't forget the bolts here on the opposite side. You want to go around those with some thread lock as well and just tighten them. Then come into your plastic plates here. Just be aware that there's a particular way round. So on one side you have a curved section there. On the back it's flat. You want to make sure the flat side is up against your tail gearbox there, like that. The other thing to be aware of here is it's actually a concave shape on the inside. So when you come to fit it, you don't want to be screwing it on at any sort of angle like that. You want to just make sure it's horizontal and then go ahead and fit it like that. And again, it's just the same principle. Just get it in position, then get some thread lock on your bolts and just tighten that up there. Okay, so when you've done that, you can think about coming to your tail fin. You can fit this. It's just these 2 bolts on the side of your gearbox case there. Just take those out, place your fin there. Again, just a bit of thread lock on those and just tighten those up. Then at this point, might be a good time to show you the tail servo push rod guide here. Now you could have put this on before you put your tail gearbox on the boom and just slid it over. But I thought I'd take this opportunity to just show you that you can actually get it on and off without taking anything else off your boom here, just by springing it open like that. Just one thing to bear in mind, make sure this screw that clamps it is all the way out, or when you come to do this you might scratch your boom here. So just spring it apart, fit it over your boom like that, and that's ready for later on when we come and do our tail servo linkage setup there. And finally, the last thing I like to do is just take my tail blade bolts and just put these back in the blade holders here, just so they're ready for when I come to fit my blades later on. Okay, so what I'll do now is go around all this, do everything I've described, tighten everything up, and that'll be our tail gearbox there, everything assembled.